Picture this. It's the middle of August, 1963. You're standing inside this really dusty, rundown farmhouse in the English countryside.
Right.
And the air is just thick with cigarette smoke and, well, paranoia. Sitting around a table is a group of these hard-looking men, a syndicate of London criminals.
Yeah, the real heavy hitters of the era.
Exactly. And they're playing a game of Monopoly. But they aren't using the colorful paper money that comes in the box.
No, definitely not.
No, they're using real, cold, hard cash. Handfuls of it. Because these men have just pulled off the heist of the century, stealing over £2.5 million from a Royal Mail train.
And just to put that into perspective for you, you're looking at the modern equivalent of roughly 64 million pounds.
Wow.
Yeah, just piled up in this decrepit farmhouse.
I mean, it's an image that feels entirely scripted by Hollywood, right?
Yeah.
But it is a documented reality.
It really is.
And the bitter irony for those men is that the fingerprints they're leaving all over that Monopoly board, amidst their celebration, are the very things that will ultimately dismantle their lives.
Which is just, it's incredible.
So, welcome to this deep dive. Today we are pulling apart a massive stack of sources to look past the folk hero legends and the romanticized myths of the 1960s London underworld.
Because there's a lot of myth-making around this.
Oh, absolutely. We want to understand how a crime of this staggering scale actually functions mechanically, from the initial intelligence gathering to the catastrophic human errors, and of course, the relentless manhunt that followed.
And the mechanics are really what make this story so compelling. Because, I mean, you don't just wake up one morning and decide to hijack a moving postal train.
Right, you'd need like a literal army for that.
Exactly, or at least military-level intelligence. And to understand how this gang got that intelligence, we really need to look at the man who orchestrated the entire operation.
Bruce Reynolds.
Right, Bruce Reynolds. And Reynolds was not your stereotypical street thug. He viewed himself as a sort of corporate CEO of crime.
A CEO of crime. I like that.
Yeah, he's ambitious, successful, constantly searching for this life of elevated adventure. And he had already assembled a highly competent core team.
Men like Gordon Goody, Charlie Wilson, Buster Edwards.
Exactly. And they were experts at robbing jewelers and airport facilities. But they faced this one massive operational hurdle.
Which was?
None of them had any idea how a railway system actually worked.
Oh, right. Because robbing a static building is, it's just a matter of bypassing alarms and locks.
Exactly.
But a moving train operates on a synchronized nationwide grid. If you stop a train on a main line, you are instantly alerting the entire railway network that something is wrong.
That is the core problem Reynolds had to solve. So he outsourced.
Like a true CEO.
Right. He brought in a secondary group known as the South Coast Raiders, specifically seeking out a man named Roger Corddry.
And why Corddry?
Because Corddry knew exactly how to manipulate trackside signals. That was his specialty. So once Reynolds had the technical capability to stop a train, he needed the target.
And the sources point to a very specific prize here, right?
Yes, the Up Special. This was a traveling post office train that ran overnight from Glasgow down to London.
So the men inside these carriages literally sorted mail as the train hurtled through the dark.
Exactly. But Reynolds wasn't interested in regular mail, obviously. He wanted the HVP carriage.
The high-value packages.
Right.
Now, a standard run of that carriage might carry, 300,000 pounds? Which is a massive score on its own?
Huge. But Reynolds targeted a very specific date, the weekend after a UK bank holiday.
Ah, because the banks had been closed.
Exactly. The sources indicate there was a massive backlog of cash moving back to London. So the projected haul spiked to somewhere between 2.5 and 3 million pounds.
But wait, that level of specific forecasting, knowing the bank holiday multiplier, knowing the exact position of the HVP carriage in the train's formation, that requires an insider.
It requires the ultimate insider.
It's the equivalent of a bank manager handing you the architectural blueprints to the vault, the guard rotation schedule, and the combination to the safe, all on a silver platter.
That's exactly what it was.
Huh.
The entire operation hinged on this shadowy figure known in the sources only as the Ulsterman.
Right, the unnamed senior security officer within the Royal Mail.
Yeah, he was the one who provided Reynolds with the structural layout of the train, the schedule, the cargo estimates. It's just a staggering breach of national security.
It really is. But reading through these sources, I kept hitting this logical wall.
What's that?
Well, if the Post Office Administration knew these specific carriages were routinely moving millions of pounds in cash, How was it possible that the gang encountered virtually no resistance? Like, there were no armed guards, no police escorts. Why was there no security?
The lack of security is almost harder to believe than the robbery itself,
Is
honestly.
that right?
But the broader context of the era is vital here. Post-war Britain was still relying heavily on this really outdated infrastructure,
Okay.
and the Post Office Investigation Branch was fully aware of the risk. In fact, 3 years prior, in 1960, they officially recommended that all high-value package carriages be fitted with secure alarms, window bars, heavy bolts, the works.
Okay, so they knew.
They knew. But by August 1963, they had managed to upgrade exactly 3 carriages.
Wait, only 3 out of an entire national fleet.
Just 3. And on the night Reynolds and his team decided to strike, those 3 upgraded carriages were out of service for maintenance.
You have got to be kidding me.
Nope. The Royal Mail needed to move the cash, so they simply swapped in a reserve carriage. Its designation was M3204M.
And I'm guessing it wasn't secure.
It had no bars on the windows, it had no alarm system. The administration had actually previously debated installing two-way radios in these carriages, but the proposal was struck down
Why?
because it was deemed, quote, too expensive.
Wow. So, to save a few pounds on radio equipment, they sent a wooden carriage carrying millions into the dark, completely cut off from the outside world.
Exactly.
I mean, that administrative failure sets the stage perfectly for the early hours of August 8th, 1963, at a remote location called Sears Crossing.
Yeah, Sears Crossing was chosen specifically for its isolation. And the method Roger Corddry used to stop the train is just this brilliant piece of analog hacking.
The track signals, right?
Right. The railway utilized a track circuit block system. So Corddry simply covered the illuminated green signal with a heavy glove.
A glove.
Yeah, a glove. And then he wired a standard heavy-duty battery to the red signal lamp.
Wait, he bypassed the entire national grid with a glove and a battery.
That's it. It forces the train to stop without triggering any immediate system-wide fault alarms in the signal boxes.
Wow. And it worked.
It worked flawlessly. Just after 3 a.m., the driver of the up special, a 58-year-old man named Jack Mills, saw the red light.
And following strict railway protocol, he applied the brakes and brought the train to a halt.
Right. And his second crew member, 26-year-old David Whitby, climbed down from the cab to use a line-side telephone to contact the signalman and report the delay.
But when Whitby reaches that phone, he finds the cables physically severed.
Yeah.
And, this is the moment the narrative of the cheeky, victimless caper entirely dissolves, because Whitby is immediately jumped and overpowered by the gang.
Right. And simultaneously, the assault team storms the engine cabin.
And Jack Mills doesn't just surrender, does he? He actively grapples with the intruder.
He fights back, and during the struggle, a gang member strikes Mills violently from behind with a heavy metal bar. Mills goes down, bleeding heavily, semi-conscious on the floor of his own locomotive.
It's just a brutal, chaotic scene.
It really is. And it's in this exact moment, with the crew incapacitated and the train secured, that Reynolds' meticulous master plan hits a catastrophic operational failure.
Oh no, this is the part with the driver.
Right. Because they could not unload the cash at Sears Crossing. The train was stopped on a steep embankment.
Too steep to carry tons of money down.
Exactly. The plan required moving the train about half a mile down the track to Bradago Bridge, where their getaway trucks were hidden.
So Ronnie Biggs had recruited an associate known to the gang as Stan Agate to drive the train.
Right. And this is where the lack of railway knowledge really bites them. Because Stan Agate was a retired train driver, sure, but his experience was limited to older southern region shunting locomotives.
Wait, what does that mean?
Basically, they're essentially yard tractors. They're designed to move cars slowly around a depot. But when he climbs into the cab of the up special, he is staring at the controls of a newer English electric Type 4 diesel locomotive.
Which is totally different.
The technological gap is massive. A Type 4 diesel is a complex, heavy-haul machine. It's got intricate air braking systems, vacuum dials, advanced power settings.
So bringing a shunting driver into that cab is like taking someone who drives a forklift and dropping them into the cockpit of a commercial airliner.
That's a perfect analogy. He looked at the dashboard and had absolutely no idea how to release the brakes or apply the throttle.
Oh my God, so they spent months planning the heist of the century, and it almost completely fell apart because they brought the wrong driver for the type of train.
Exactly.
The tension in that cab must have been suffocating. I mean, they've spent months coordinating 15 men. They have secured the insider intel. They've successfully hijacked the train, and they are completely paralyzed because of this.
Yeah, and so they are forced into a very dark pivot. With the clock ticking and no alternative, they drag the bleeding, semi-conscious Jack Mills back into the driver's seat.
That's horrifying.
It is. They force him to operate the machinery and drive the train that half-mile to Brigadigo Bridge.
And Mills complies, right? He gets them to the bridge.
He does.
And once there, the operation shifts from chaotic violence back to terrifying efficiency. They assemble a human chain of 15 men down the embankment.
Right. And the sources detail that in a window of just 15 to 20 minutes, they physically move 120 mail bags.
Which is weighing roughly 2.5 tons, by the way.
Exactly. Out of the carriage and into the waiting trucks. The discipline here is really notable.
Because Bruce Reynolds had established a rigid 30-minute time limit for the extraction.
Yes, he knew the longer they stayed, the exponentially higher the risk of a passing train or a police patrol spotting them.
Right.
So when that 30-minute mark hit, Reynolds called it off. They actually left 8 bags of money sitting in the carriage simply because the time had expired.
Wow. Talk about discipline. So they loaded the trucks, transferred the loot into 2 Land Rovers equipped with identical license plates to confuse any potential witnesses, and they just disappeared.
And their destination is a hideout called Leather Slade Farm, which is roughly 27 miles away.
And they had purchased this months in advance specifically for this purpose, right?
They had. They arrived just as the sun is coming up, around 4:30 a.m., right as the very first confused, fragmented police reports are beginning to broadcast.
The atmosphere inside that farm must have been just a volatile mix of adrenaline and sudden, crushing paranoia.
Oh, undoubtedly.
Mm.
They begin the laborious process of dividing the money. It calculates out to 16 full shares, each worth roughly 150,000 pounds.
But as they are physically counting this massive fortune, they have a VHF radio tuned to the police frequency.
Right.
And they intercept a piece of information that unravels their entire timeline.
This is such a crazy detail.
During the raid on the train, one of the gang members had barked an order at the postal workers huddled in the carriage. He told them, "Don't move for half an hour."
Yeah.
And to the robber, it was just standard intimidation, just a way to buy time for the getaway. But to the police, it was a mathematical equation.
It's a brilliant piece of deductive policing. The detectives analyzing the witness statements realized that criminals don't usually offer arbitrary timeframes.
Why specifically half an hour?
Right. Exactly. So the logical deduction was that 30 minutes represented the exact travel time from Brigadigo Bridge to the gang's safe house.
Which means a 30-minute drive in a fast vehicle translates to roughly a 30-mile radius.
Right.
Hearing that deduction broadcast over the police radio would be terrifying. One casual sentence spoken to a victim accidentally gave the police the exact geographical radius they needed to crack the case.
It's incredible. The gang realizes the police aren't searching the whole of England. They are methodically drawing a 30-mile circle around the bridge.
And Leather Slade Farm is 27 miles away. They are squarely inside the dragnet.
Originally, the gang had planned to lay low at the farm until Sunday, to let the initial heat die down.
Right. Wait it out.
But that radio broadcast forces them to abandon that strategy. They realize they have to evacuate immediately on Friday.
But they have a massive problem. The farm is covered in evidence.
Oh, completely covered.
But they had a contingency for this, didn't they? A solicitor's clerk and gang associate named Brian Field was responsible for the cleanup.
Right. His explicit instruction was to ensure the farmhouse was burned to the foundation, destroying every fiber, footprint, and fingerprint.
But Field subcontracts this job. He pays a man known as Mark £10,000 to light the match.
And £10,000 in 1963 is a life-changing sum of money.
Oh, yeah. So Mark accepts the money, drives out to the farm, assesses the situation, and simply walks away. He never sets the fire.
Which makes complete sense from the perspective of a criminal under immense pressure.
Right. Because what is Brian Field going to do? He can't exactly call the police and report a breach of contract on an arson job connected to the heist of the century.
No, he can't. So Mark realizes he has all the leverage, keeps the cash, and vanishes.
Unbelievable.
And because of that singular failure, when the police eventually discovered Leatherslade Farm 5 days after the robbery, they walk into a pristine forensic environment.
Right, because the gang had made a frantic, sloppy attempt to wipe down some surfaces, but they were rushing.
Yeah, investigators recovered sleeping bags, empty mail sacks, a ketchup bottle, and of course, the Monopoly board.
The entire property was saturated with clear, identifiable fingerprints.
It was.
The cascade of cause and effect here is just fascinating. A throwaway threat on the train gives the police a geographical radius. That radius causes a panic at the farm. The panic necessitates an early escape and a rushed cleanup. The botched cleanup preserves the fingerprints.
It's a perfect storm of errors.
And once the police process those prints, the nature of the story changes. It's no longer a mystery, it's a manhunt.
And leading that manhunt was Detective Chief Superintendent Tommy Butler, known within the force as the Gray Fox.
The Gray Fox.
Yeah, Butler was the head of the flying squad's train robbery investigation, and he was an incredibly intense, obsessive figure.
How obsessive are we talking?
Well, he was an unmarried career policeman who still lived with his mother, and he dedicated literally every waking hour to thief-taking. He drove his six-man squad so relentlessly, he often allowed them only 3 hours of sleep a night.
Good grief.
He was also notoriously secretive. He frequently refused to share intelligence with other departments or even his own subordinates.
And that intense, high-pressure environment within the police force inevitably led to some deeply questionable tactics, I'd imagine.
Oh, definitely. There was intense public and political pressure to resolve this case quickly. And that pressure created the environment for the telephone box deal.
Ah, right. So this incident involves another detective, Frank Williams. Williams brought in a man named Danny Pembroke for questioning.
And intelligence heavily suggested Pembroke was one of the South Coast raiders. But more critically, detectives strongly suspected Pembroke was the individual who wielded the metal bar that crushed Jack Mills' skull.
But suspicion isn't evidence. They didn't have his fingerprints at the farm, and they couldn't place him at the bridge.
Precisely. So operating in that gray area, Williams struck a backroom arrangement. He essentially permitted Pembroke to walk out of the station a free man, granting him de facto immunity.
Unbelievable.
In exchange, Pembroke arranged for the return of a portion of the stolen funds. Shortly after the release, an anonymous tip directed officers to a public telephone box in South London.
And inside, they found over £47,000 in stolen cash.
Right.
It's such a dark, pragmatic compromise. I mean, you are allowing a violently dangerous man to go free simply to secure a PR victory by recovering a fraction of the money.
Yeah, and it caused massive internal outrage within the police hierarchy. But despite the friction, Butler's squad did apprehend the majority of the core gang.
And the resulting trial took place in Aylesbury in 1964. And the scale of it was unprecedented.
The logistics alone were staggering. They had to commandeer and convert the local rural district council offices just to have a room large enough to hold the defendants, the lawyers, and the media.
Wow.
The proceedings lasted 51 days. The prosecution introduced over 600 individual exhibits.
And when the verdicts were finalized, the judge delivered sentences that absolutely stunned the British public.
30 years.
30 years. For armed robbery and conspiracy, the core members were handed 30-year sentences. But 30 years is longer than many murderers got at the time. I mean, did this massive punishment actually deter crime?
According to Bruce Reynolds, it achieved the exact opposite.
Really?
Yeah, this is the concept known as marginal deterrence. Reynolds later argued that these draconian sentences fundamentally altered the rules of engagement for the London underworld.
How so?
Well, if the judicial system is going to penalize unarmed robbery with the exact same 30-year sentence as armed robbery, criminals lose any incentive to leave their weapons at home.
Ah.
Reynolds claimed the sentences essentially armed the criminal fraternity as men figured they had nothing to lose by shooting their way out of an arrest.
That makes a terrifying amount of sense. And the inflexibility of the justice system in this case also resulted in sheer tragedy, most notably for a man named Bill Ball.
Right. Ball was a 50-year-old engineer who knew Roger Corddry. He was arrested while in a car with Corddry where some of the stolen money was hidden.
But the evidence suggests Ball was, at the very worst, an accessory after the fact. I mean, he was not at Sears Crossing, he was not at Bridego Bridge, he was not at Leatherslade Farm.
He wasn't. But the prosecution just steamrolled him, lumping him in with the primary assault team. He was convicted and sentenced to 24 years in prison.
And even when the actual robbers signed sworn affidavits from their prison cells stating explicitly that Bull was not involved in the heist, the authorities refused to review his case.
The system couldn't afford to look fallible.
It's tragic. Bull died of cancer in prison in 1970, a victim of the state's desperate need to secure convictions.
And, you know, the heavy-handed sentences were intended to draw a definitive line under the Great Train Robbery. Instead, they merely launched the next phase of the saga.
Because men who are handed 30 years do not generally accept their fate quietly.
Exactly. Just months after the trial, Charlie Wilson was broken out of Winson Green Prison in Birmingham. An external team infiltrated the facility, secured Wilson, and vanished in under 3 minutes.
And the following year, Ronnie Biggs made his exit from Wandsworth Prison.
Yeah, the logistics of that escape involved a furniture van parked alongside the exterior wall and a ladder dropped down into the exercise yard.
Biggs scaled the wall, dropped onto the van, and began a life on the run that would take him to Paris, Australia, and eventually Brazil,
where he avoided extradition for decades by fathering a child with a Brazilian woman.
Meanwhile, Bruce Reynolds lived an incredibly lavish lifestyle on the run in Mexico and Canada, treating his share of the money as an endless expense account.
Right, until he eventually depleted his funds, returned to the UK, and was captured by Tommy Butler in 1968.
Which raises a crucial aspect of the story: the economics of the stolen money. Out of the original £2.6 million, police recovered less than $400,000.
Yeah.
It's easy to assume the robbers lived like kings, hoarding the rest in offshore accounts. But the reality of a criminal economy is vastly different. The money was subjected to an intense underground tax.
It evaporated rapidly. Legal defense fees alone cost the men £30,000 each. The logistics of life on the run, procuring forged passports, international travel, securing safe houses, it drained their reserves.
And furthermore, they were constantly preyed upon, right?
Oh, absolutely. Associates tasked with hiding the money simply stole it. Extortionists demanded massive payouts to keep quiet. The greatest cash haul in British history was essentially vaporized by the sheer cost of maintaining a fugitive lifestyle.
So I have to ask you, the listener, why do we often remember these robbers as cheeky, glamorous folk heroes when the reality was that they lost most of the money, spent their lives looking over their shoulders, and destroyed the lives of innocent working-class men?
That's the real crux of it. The true legacy of the robbery is found in the lives of the railwaymen.
Jack Mills never fully recovered from the trauma of the assault. He suffered from severe chronic headaches for the rest of his life, passing away in 1970.
And David Whitby, the young second crewman, was profoundly psychologically damaged by his treatment that night. The stress contributed to a fatal heart attack when he was just 34 years old.
It was not a victimless caper, it was an act of brutal violence against working men. When you step back and look at the entirety of the operation, the label of a masterpiece of modern crime feels entirely misplaced.
It was a chaotic collision of brilliant intelligence and staggering incompetence.
They couldn't operate the machinery they came to steal. They entrusted the destruction of their hideout to a man who simply walked away. They left their identities on a children's board game.
The operation was structurally unsound from the moment they boarded the train. But there is one final piece of this puzzle, a lingering question of human motivation that complicates the entire narrative.
Yes. For decades, the identity of the Ulsterman, the insider who made the entire heist possible, was the greatest unsolved mystery of the case.
Until 2014, when Gordon Goody finally provided a name.
Patrick McKenna.
Right, Patrick McKenna. And McKenna was a 43-year-old postal worker living a very modest life in Salford.
Wait, so he was not a hardened criminal?
No, not at all. He had no police record. He died with almost no assets to his name.
So the obvious question is, why would a man like that risk treason to facilitate an armed robbery?
Right.
And more importantly, what happened to his £150,000 share of the loot?
The sources suggest a fascinating theory here. McKenna was reportedly deeply frustrated by the Royal Mail's blatant disregard for the safety of its night train staff.
Oh, because they refused to upgrade the carriages?
Exactly. He knew the carriages were vulnerable and that the administration was prioritizing cost over human lives. So providing the intel may have been a twisted attempt to force the post office into upgrading their security.
And what about his massive cut of the money?
Well, Goody claimed McKenna never spent a penny of it on himself. Instead, it is believed he slowly, anonymously donated his entire fortune to the Catholic Church over the course of his remaining years.
Wow. So you start the story visualizing a syndicate of violent men hoarding millions in a sweaty farmhouse, and you end it with a quiet postal worker secretly filtering a fortune into Sunday collection plates.
It's wild. Was the greatest heist in British history secretly funding Sunday Mass?
It really leaves you to consider the deeply complicated, often contradictory nature of why people do the things they do. The Great Train Robbery wasn't just a heist, it was a profound failure of systems, both mechanical and human. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us.